Amelia. Nathan's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the hum of clinking glasses and murmured conversations. He stood at the center of the grand ballroom, his expression calm, almost cruelly detached. Let's stop pretending. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning to the couple standing under the glittering chandelier. Amelia froze, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him, but the chilling smirk curling at the corners of his lips told her otherwise. I think it's time we're honest with everyone here, Nathan continued, his tone smug, amplified by the microphone in his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate what has been, frankly, a farce of a marriage. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Amelia's chest tightened. Her breath caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. She tried to speak, but the words lodged in her throat, as if silenced by the weight of his betrayal. For 5 years, Nathan went on, gesturing toward her like she was an inconvenient object, I've carried the burden of this marriage. I built my company from the ground up while Amelia, he chuckled, shaking his head. Well, let's just say she played the role of a trophy wife quite convincingly. Amelia's hand shot to her chest, the sting of his words cutting deeper than any blade. She searched his face, looking for a sign that this was some kind of cruel joke, but all she found was cold determination. Nathan raised his glass in a mock toast, his smirk widening. But tonight marks the end of that charade. I've found someone who actually supports me, someone who understands what I need to keep moving forward. From the corner of the room, a woman emerged, Sophia, Nathan's assistant, her scarlet dress hugging her curves like a statement of triumph. She sidled up to him, wrapping her arm possessively around his. I'm leaving you, Amelia, Nathan declared, his voice ringing out for everyone to hear. The divorce papers will be on your desk tomorrow. The room erupted into murmurs of shock and disbelief, but all Amelia could hear was the roaring in her ears. Her vision blurred as humiliation and fury warred for dominance in her chest. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass until it shattered, shards slicing into her palm. Still, she didn't flinch. As blood trickled down her hand, she took a slow step forward, her gaze locking onto Nathan's with a calm that terrified him. You think this is over? She said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. Nathan faltered for a fraction of a second, but Sophia's smug grin pushed him to regain his composure. It's been over for years, he sneered. Amelia smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We'll see about that, she said. Amelia's heels clicked softly against the marble floor of the grand foyer as she stepped into the house. The echoes sounded hollow, like the emptiness inside her chest. The place she had once called home now felt cold, foreign, and hostile. She paused by the staircase, gripping the banister to steady herself. The night had been a blur since she left the party. Her chest still burned from Nathan's cruel words, his public humiliation cutting deeper than she thought possible. Yet, against all instincts, she had returned here. Not out of hope, but out of obligation. This was her home. She had poured years of her life into it, crafting it into something beautiful. Even if Nathan had claimed it as his own, she wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But the sound of laughter broke her thoughts. It came from the living room, low and muffled but unmistakably Nathan's. She stiffened, her grip on the banister tightening as another voice joined his, a woman's voice, light and melodic, dripping with smugness. Sophia. Amelia's chest tightened as she walked down the hallway, each step slow and deliberate. She didn't know what she expected to find, but the sight that greeted her made her stomach churn. Nathan was lounging on the couch, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table in front of him. Sophia sat curled up beside him, her legs draped over his lap, a satisfied smile on her face. They looked as though they belonged there, as though this had always been their home. Nathan noticed her first. He raised an eyebrow, his lips twisting into a smirk. Well, look who decided to show up, he said, his voice laced with mockery. Sophia turned to look at her, her smile widening. Oh, Amelia, she said sweetly. You're still here? I thought you'd run off by now. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. She had prepared herself for hostility, but not for this. The sight of Sophia, so comfortable and confident in her space, was like a slap to the face. I came back to talk, she said quietly, keeping her voice steady. Talk about what? Nathan said, leaning back against the couch. We've got nothing left to say. Sophia laughed, the sound grating against Amelia's ears. Oh, Nathan, don't be so cruel, she said, though her tone betrayed no real concern. Poor Amelia's probably just confused. She's been living in a fantasy for so long. She doesn't know how to let go. Amelia's hands trembled, but she refused to let them see her weakness. This is still my house, she said, her voice firmer this time. I deserve some respect. Nathan snorted. Respect? From me? You've done nothing to earn it. He gestured around the room. Everything here, everything I've built, it's mine. You've just been along for the ride. Amelia stared at him, her heart pounding. Did he really believe that? Did he truly think she had contributed nothing? You don't mean that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, I do, Nathan said, standing up. He towered over her, his expression cold and unrelenting. You're nothing, Amelia. You always have been. Sophia rose as well, sliding her arm around Nathan's waist. Come on, Nathan, she said, her tone playful. Don't waste your energy on her. She's not worth it. Amelia felt her chest tighten, anger bubbling beneath the surface. But she refused to let it show. Instead, she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and met Nathan's gaze head-on. You'll regret this, she said simply. Nathan smirked. I doubt it. Without another word, Amelia turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. The car's headlights pierced the dark countryside road as Amelia stared out of the window, her reflection blending with the shadows of the night. The further they drove from the house she once called home, the lighter her chest felt, but the ache in her heart refused to fade. It had been 5 years since she'd last been to the Foster estate. 5 years of playing the role of a devoted wife, building a life with Nathan, and quietly supporting him while burying parts of herself. She hadn't just given him her love. She'd given him her trust, her connections, her everything. And now, she was returning empty-handed. Ma'am, we're almost there, the driver said, his voice cutting through the silence. Amelia nodded absently, clutching her purse tighter. She didn't respond, her thoughts too scattered to form words. The gates of the Foster estate came into view moments later, their familiar ironwork standing tall and imposing. As they swung open, revealing the grand mansion beyond, a wave of memories crashed over her. The house hadn't changed. Its ivory walls glowed under the soft illumination of the exterior lights, the sprawling gardens perfectly manicured. It was a place of beauty and power, a stark contrast to the small, impersonal house she had shared with Nathan. The car rolled to a stop in front of the entrance, and the door was pulled open before Amelia could even gather her thoughts. Amelia, her younger sister, Charlotte, rushed forward, her arms wrapping tightly around Amelia before she could step out of the car. The familiar scent of her sister's floral perfume brought tears to Amelia's eyes, but she blinked them away, holding herself together. Charlotte, she murmured, her voice breaking. It's been too long, Charlotte said, pulling back to study her face. What happened? You look. She paused, her expression softening. You look like you've been through hell. Amelia managed a weak smile. Something like that. Come on, Charlotte said, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Everyone's been waiting for you. Inside the mansion, the warmth of the familiar surroundings wrapped around Amelia like a comforting blanket. The grand chandelier in the foyer sparkled above them, its light casting intricate patterns on the marble floor. Her parents were waiting in the living room. Robert Foster, ever the stern patriarch, stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed. Evelyn Foster sat on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Despite the years that had passed, their expressions of concern and authority hadn't changed. Amelia, her father said as she entered the room. His voice was firm, but there was an undercurrent of relief that softened his usual tone. Dad. Mom. Amelia's voice wavered as she stepped forward. Evelyn rose and enveloped her in a gentle hug. Oh, my darling, she murmured, stroking Amelia's hair. You're finally home. Robert cleared his throat, his sharp gaze fixed on his daughter. You should have come back sooner, he said, his tone stern but not unkind. I told you that man was no good for you. Amelia stepped back, meeting her father's gaze with quiet resolve. I know, Dad. You were right. Her admission seemed to catch him off guard. He studied her for a moment before nodding. Good. At least you've come to your senses. Robert, Evelyn chided softly, giving him a look. She turned back to Amelia, her expression filled with concern. Tell us what happened, dear. Start from the beginning. Amelia hesitated, the weight of the night threatening to crush her. But as she looked around the room, at her mother's comforting gaze, her father's protective stance and Charlotte's unwavering support, she felt a flicker of strength. She sank onto the sofa and began to recount everything. By the time she finished, the room was heavy with silence. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her soft sniffles the only sound. Charlotte sat beside Amelia, her jaw tight with anger. "That bastard," Charlotte muttered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare he treat you like that? After everything you've done for him." Robert, who had remained silent throughout the story, finally spoke. "I'll make sure he regrets it," he said, his voice cold and steely. "One phone call is all it takes. His business, his reputation, his life. I can destroy it all." "No," Amelia said, her voice firm. Her family turned to her in surprise. "This is my fight," she continued, meeting her father's gaze. "Nathan thinks I'm weak, that I'm nothing without him. I need to show him how wrong he is. But I'll do it on my terms." Robert frowned. "Amelia, there's no need to handle this alone. You don't have to prove anything to that man." "It's not about proving anything," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "It's about taking back control. I let him humiliate me, take advantage of me, and treat me like I was worthless. But not anymore." Evelyn reached out, placing a hand over Amelia's. "We'll support you no matter what you decide," she said gently. Charlotte nodded. "Just say the word, and I'll help you bury him." Amelia managed a small smile, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, all of you." Later that night, as she lay in the bed of her childhood room, the memories came flooding back. She thought of the first time she met Nathan, his easy charm and confident smile drawing her in. She remembered the early days of their relationship, how he had made her feel like the most important person in the world. And she thought of the years that followed, the sacrifices she made, the opportunities she created for him, and the countless times she used her family's connections to open doors he couldn't. She had given him everything, believing in his dreams and his promises. And now he had thrown it all away. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but beneath the pain was a growing sense of determination. Nathan had made a mistake, a fatal one. "He doesn't know who I really am," she thought, her jaw tightening. "But he's about to find out." Morning sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of Amelia's childhood bedroom, but it didn't bring peace. She had spent most of the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling as memories of the past 5 years haunted her. By the time the first light crept in, the sorrow had started to harden into something else, resolve. She sat up, the familiar comfort of the room around her contrasting with the turmoil inside. The soft lavender walls, the plush bedspread, the bookshelves still lined with her favorite novels from university. All of it felt like a different lifetime. Here, she was Amelia Foster, daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the country. Not Amelia Gray, the humiliated wife of Nathan, a man who had used and discarded her. The sharp knock on the door startled her. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. The door opened, and Charlotte entered, holding a tray with coffee and croissants. "Figured you'd be up," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" Amelia offered a weak smile. "Like I got hit by a truck." Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed, her sharp eyes studying her sister. "You didn't deserve what he did to you," she said bluntly. "And I'm not just saying that because I'm your sister. Nathan's always been a snake, Amelia. You were too good for him." Amelia sighed, reaching for the coffee. "I didn't see it at first," she admitted. "I thought he loved me. I thought he appreciated everything I did for him." Charlotte crossed her arms. "Do you regret marrying him?" The question hung in the air. Amelia took a sip of her coffee, the bitter taste grounding her. "I regret trusting him," she said finally. "But no, I don't regret marrying him. I learned a lot from that mistake." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Mistake? You're still calling him that politely?" Amelia smirked despite herself. "Fine. A colossal mistake. Happy. Getting there." Charlotte leaned in closer, her expression turning serious. "So what's the plan?" Amelia frowned. "Plan? Oh, come on." Charlotte waved a hand dismissively. "Don't play coy with me. I know that look in your eye. You're not just going to let him get away with this." Amelia's silence was answer enough. Amelia spent the morning in her father's study. The room was a grand space filled with dark wood paneling, shelves of leather-bound books, and the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. She sat at the massive oak desk, poring over documents and making calls. Her father had been reluctant to step back and let her handle things, but Amelia had insisted. This was her fight, and she needed to reclaim her power on her own terms. The first call was to an old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, but who still owed her family a favor. Then another, this time to a banker Nathan didn't know was connected to the Fosters. By the time she finished, the groundwork for her plan was in place. Amelia leaned back in the chair, a small, satisfied smile tugging at her lips. Nathan had no idea what was coming. That night, as Amelia lay in bed, her thoughts drifted back to the beginning of it all. She had met Nathan at a charity gala, one of those glittering events her family insisted she attend. She had been tired of the shallow conversations and forced smiles when he appeared, charming and confident in his ill-fitted suit. He wasn't like the other men there, she had thought. He had ambition, drive, and just enough vulnerability to make him seem genuine. They talked for hours, and by the end of the night, Amelia was smitten. Their courtship had been fast and passionate. Nathan made her feel seen, valued, and loved, or so she thought. She had kept her true identity a secret, wanting him to love her for herself, not her wealth. She told him she was a small-town girl who had worked her way up, and he had believed her. When they married, Amelia decided to keep the lie going. She wanted to build a life with Nathan without her family's influence overshadowing everything. But it wasn't long before she started to see cracks in his facade. Nathan's business ventures were ambitious but reckless. He took risks without understanding the consequences, and it became clear that he lacked the connections and expertise to succeed on his own. That's when Amelia stepped in. Quietly, without telling him, she began pulling strings. A word to her father here, a favor from an old friend there. She smoothed over deals that should have fallen apart, opened doors that should have remained closed. And Nathan took all the credit. At first, she didn't mind. She told herself it was for the greater good, that she was helping him achieve his dreams. But as the years went on, his arrogance grew, and his gratitude faded. Then came Sophia. Amelia had noticed the signs. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden coldness in their relationship. But she hadn't wanted to believe it. She had convinced herself that Nathan wouldn't betray her like that. Not after everything they'd been through. The anniversary party had shattered that illusion. The next morning, Amelia joined her father for breakfast on the veranda. The sun was shining, the air crisp and fresh, but her mind was already working through the next steps of her plan. "I still think you should let me handle this," Robert said, sipping his coffee. "I appreciate the offer, Dad, but this is personal," Amelia replied. Robert frowned. Personal or not, he's a fool if he thinks he can humiliate a Foster and get away with it. Amelia smiled. He is a fool. That's why this will work. She spent the rest of the day meeting with key people, financial advisors, lawyers, and trusted allies who were more than happy to help her. Nathan didn't know it, but the very foundation of his business was about to crumble. That evening, Amelia sent Nathan a message. It was simple, just a single sentence. "You'll regret underestimating me." When he saw it, she knew he would laugh. He'd think it was a desperate attempt to cling to power, a hollow threat from a woman he believed was weak and defeated. But Amelia wasn't weak. And soon, Nathan would realize just how wrong he had been. Nathan leaned back in his office chair, the leather creaking as he skimmed through the latest financial reports. The numbers were solid, though not spectacular, but that didn't matter. To him, the future was brighter than ever. With Amelia gone, he felt lighter. No more nagging, no more suggestions on how to manage the business, and no more pressure to play the devoted husband. Everything he dreamed of was finally within reach. Beside him, Sophia perched on the desk, twirling a strand of her hair and pretending to care about the spreadsheets in front of him. "So," she purred, crossing her legs provocatively, "when are we making this official? You and me." Nathan glanced up, his smirk lazy. "Soon. Just need to finalize the divorce papers and deal with a few business matters." Sophia pouted. "You've been saying that for weeks. What's the holdup? It's not like she's going to fight you. She's broke, right?" Nathan chuckled, spinning his pen between his fingers. "Oh, she's more than broke. By now, she's probably begging her family for scraps." Amelia never had the stomach for the real world. Sophia giggled, leaning down to plant a kiss on his cheek. "Good. Because I want what's mine." Nathan's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. He glanced at the screen, his smirk fading when he saw the message. "You'll regret underestimating me." The sender, Amelia. For a moment, He just stared at the words. Then, with a scoff, he tossed the phone onto the desk. Pathetic, he muttered. What is it? Sophia asked, craning her neck to see the screen. Nothing, Nathan said, his tone dismissive. Just Amelia trying to act tough. She's probably still bitter about the party. Sophia laughed, her voice shrill. What's she going to do? Cry herself to sleep? She's harmless. Nathan leaned back again, his confidence unshaken. Exactly. She'll fade away, and we'll never have to think about her again. But deep down, a small voice whispered doubts he didn't want to acknowledge. The first signs of trouble came 2 days later. Nathan was in a meeting with his investors, pitching a new expansion plan for Gray Enterprises. Everything had been going smoothly. His presentation was polished, and the investors seemed interested, until one of them, an older man named Mr. Lawson, raised his hand. I have a concern, Lawson said, his tone measured but firm. Nathan smiled, confident. Of course. Let's address it. Lawson slid a document across the table. I received this report yesterday. It seems there's some discrepancy in your financial projections. Specifically, a few key contracts that were supposed to close have fallen through. Nathan's smile faltered. That's not possible. Those contracts were secured weeks ago. Lawson's brow furrowed. Apparently not. One of my contacts informed me that the suppliers have withdrawn their support. Nathan's stomach dropped. I'll look into it immediately, he said, trying to maintain his composure. But as the meeting continued, it became clear that the damage was worse than he thought. Another investor mentioned hearing rumors about delays in Nathan's shipping logistics. Someone else brought up whispers of a pending lawsuit from a disgruntled partner. By the time the meeting ended, Nathan was reeling. Back in his office, Nathan frantically called his team, demanding answers. His assistant scrambled to pull up reports, but nothing made sense. The contracts had indeed fallen through, with vague explanations citing shifting priorities and better offers. The shipping delays were real, though no one seemed to know why. And then there was the lawsuit, a former vendor claiming breach of contract, a situation Nathan hadn't even been aware of. This doesn't make sense, Nathan muttered, running a hand through his hair. Everything was fine last week. Sophia sauntered in, a cup of coffee in hand. What's got you all worked up? Nathan shot her a glare. Half my deals are falling apart, and now there's a lawsuit. Something's not right. Sophia shrugged, setting the coffee on his desk. Maybe it's just bad luck. Business is unpredictable, right? Nathan didn't respond. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. At the Foster estate, Amelia sat in her father's study, reviewing the latest updates from her contacts. The reports were promising. Nathan's business was already showing cracks, and the pressure would only increase in the coming weeks. He's starting to feel it, Charlotte said, lounging in the armchair across from her. I heard from a friend that one of his investors is pulling out. Amelia nodded, her gaze focused on the papers in front of her. Good. But this is just the beginning. Her father entered the room, a rare smile on his face. You're playing this well, Amelia. Strategic, methodical. He won't see it coming. Amelia looked up, her expression calm but determined. He thought I was weak. He thought he could humiliate me and walk away unscathed. But he doesn't know who he's dealing with. Robert's smile widened. I almost feel sorry for the man. Almost. Over the next week, Nathan's world continued to crumble. Another investor pulled out, citing concerns over instability. Suppliers began demanding upfront payments, something Nathan's company couldn't afford. The lawsuit gained traction, with damaging evidence surfacing that painted Nathan as negligent. He tried to fix it, calling contacts, offering deals, even considering liquidating assets, but nothing worked. It was as if someone was orchestrating the chaos, pulling strings to ensure his downfall. One night, as he sat alone in his office, staring at the mess of papers on his desk, the realization hit him. Amelia. It had to be her. He picked up his phone, his hand trembling with anger and fear. He dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. You think you're clever? He hissed into the phone. I know this is you. Whatever game you're playing, you'd better stop. You'll regret this. But as he hung up, the small voice of doubt returned, louder this time. What if she's smarter than you think? The days after Nathan's realization were filled with a growing unease that gnawed at him, unrelenting and suffocating. He was used to control. His whole life had been about managing situations, making deals, and securing outcomes. But this was something different. It was as if the ground beneath him was slowly eroding, with no way to stop the inevitable collapse. Every time he tried to pull his company out of the nosedive, something else seemed to drag him further down. In the quiet of his office, late one night, he sifted through the financials again, looking for a way out. He had tried everything, restructuring, renegotiating, and even promising extra incentives to keep his investors on board. But nothing worked. His phone lay on the desk beside him, the unanswered call to Amelia from earlier still lingering in his mind like a sour taste. She did this, he muttered, staring at the numbers that mocked him from the screen. His gut told him Amelia was behind it, that all of this, the failed contracts, the lawsuits, the pulling away of his business partners, was orchestrated. But how? She was no longer in his life, was she? Then why did it feel as though she was still pulling his strings from afar? The sharp sound of his office door opening broke his train of thought. Sophia walked in, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her smile wide but lacking warmth. "You look like hell," she observed with a glance at his disheveled appearance. "What's going on? Did you get the papers you needed?" Nathan didn't even acknowledge the question. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Something's wrong, Sophia. Everything is falling apart." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "It's just business, Nathan. You'll bounce back. You always do." Her voice was comforting, but Nathan could hear the edge of doubt creeping into it. His own doubts were starting to creep in too. "I don't think so this time," he said quietly. "Something's not right." He finally met her eyes. "I think it's Amelia." Sophia froze, her expression shifting slightly, a flicker of something darker passing over her features before it vanished. She leaned forward, her tone light but guarded. "What do you mean?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know how she did it, but all of this, it's her. It has to be." Sophia let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Amelia? The woman who couldn't even keep you happy enough to stay married to you? Nathan, she's gone. She's not some puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes. You're just going through a rough patch. It happens to the best of us." Nathan wanted to believe her. He really did. But the mounting evidence, no, the certainty, told him otherwise. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She knows people. Powerful people. She's the one who's been helping me all these years without me knowing. She's not some helpless woman." Sophia didn't respond right away. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, and she took a step back. "You know her better than I do," she said finally, her voice tinged with something that wasn't quite disdain, but wasn't exactly support either. "But you should be careful with that kind of thinking. Revenge can come from all kinds of places. You might not even see it coming." Nathan stared at her, but something about her words unsettled him. What if Sophia was right? What if Amelia was already one step ahead, watching him unravel and enjoying every moment of it? The thought was enough to send a chill down his spine. Amelia stood at the large windows of her father's study, staring out at the vast expanse of the estate. The sprawling grounds, the stately mansion, and the peaceful serenity of it all did little to calm her. Inside, her mind was far from at ease. Her plan was coming together, but it wasn't the sense of victory that filled her. It was something else, something darker. Every time she thought about Nathan, the humiliation he had put her through at the party, the cruel way he had discarded her as if she meant nothing, it pushed her forward. But a part of her, a small, unexpected part, still hurt. Another call? Charlotte's voice brought Amelia back to the present. Amelia glanced at her phone, which had been buzzing nonstop for the last few hours. The message thread was a mix of business and personal matters. Contacts who were eager to assist her with her revenge. She had already secured a few more strategic financial moves, and now, things were truly starting to spiral for Nathan. "I think he knows," Amelia said softly, though she wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement. "Of course he does," Charlotte replied, sitting on the armrest of Amelia's chair. "You've been careful, but you're also not exactly subtle. People know you've been pulling strings for years. And now he's starting to feel the consequences of his arrogance." Amelia turned, her gaze firm. "I never wanted this, Charlotte. I didn't want it to end like this." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "No, you didn't. But you're doing what you have to. He deserved it." The room fell silent for a moment as Amelia processed her sister's words. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, her eyes narrowing when she saw Nathan's name flash across it. "I think he's ready to beg," Amelia said with a cold smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's time. The following day, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. The pressure was unbearable, and every attempt he made to regain control only seemed to make things worse. His reputation was on the line, and with it, the future of Gray Enterprises. His phone rang once more, this time with an unknown number. He answered it immediately, almost hoping for some miracle. Nathan Gray. The voice on the other end was cool, professional, and unmistakable. This is Amelia. For a moment he couldn't speak. Hearing her voice after all this time, so calm and controlled, sent a wave of dread crashing through him. What do you want? He finally asked, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. I think you know what I want, Amelia replied, her tone light but laced with an edge he couldn't ignore. I've been thinking about what you said at the party, about how you'd move on and forget about me. Nathan felt a tightness in his chest. He could hear the subtle venom in her words, and for the first time, he was unsure of himself. Amelia. No, she interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. I didn't deserve what you did to me. You humiliated me in front of everyone, Nathan. You thought I was nothing. Her words hung in the air like a weight he couldn't escape. And now, she continued, her voice growing colder, I'm making sure you remember who I am. Before Nathan could respond, the call ended. Amelia set the phone down with a steady hand, her heart pounding in her chest. Nathan had always underestimated her, and now, he was about to pay for it. This wasn't just about business or revenge. It was about reclaiming her dignity. The quiet, patient way she had navigated their marriage, the way she had worked behind the scenes to build him up, would now serve a new purpose. Nathan had taken her kindness for weakness. Now she would show him just how wrong he was. And in the end, he'd be left with nothing. Amelia stood at the edge of the sleek, glass-walled conference room, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the table as she watched the sun set behind the skyline. The reflection of the city stretched across the windows, reminding her of everything she had worked for. Everything she had been willing to hide, to sacrifice. She had played the part of the dutiful wife for years, but now, the gloves were coming off. It had been nearly a week since her conversation with Nathan, the one where his words were filled with shame and a desperate, hollow plea. It had been almost satisfying, hearing him beg her for a second chance, though it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. She could still feel the sting of his public humiliation, like a wound that hadn't healed. He would have to suffer more, much more, before she'd even consider forgiving him. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Amelia picked it up without hesitation, her heart rate quickening at the sight of Nathan's name. He was persistent, his guilt evident in each of his attempts to reach her. But this time, there was no room for softness. She answered, Amelia, please. I need to talk to you. No, she interrupted coldly, cutting through his words like a knife. There's nothing to discuss. Nathan, she added, her voice sharper now, you had your chance. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. A tense silence followed, and Amelia could practically hear him swallowing his frustration on the other end. Then, in a voice full of vulnerability and regret, he said, I know what I did was unforgivable, but you're not just going to leave me like this, right? I'll fix everything. I'll make it right. Amelia's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. You don't get to fix it. You don't get to control the narrative anymore, Nathan. Before he could respond, she hung up. She leaned back against the table, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. She was no longer the woman he could manipulate or belittle. Amelia was tired of pretending, tired of holding on to a facade that no longer served any purpose. But her exhaustion wasn't about the past. It was about the future she was now building piece by piece. In the quiet of her family estate, the mansion's vast hallways were bathed in the soft glow of evening light. Her siblings had long gone to bed, but her parents were still in the sitting room, waiting for her. When Amelia entered, her father looked up from his newspaper, his brow furrowed in concern. You've been quiet lately. You're handling everything well, right? Amelia smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course, everything is fine. Her mother, always the more perceptive of the two, watched her with careful eyes. What's going on, sweetheart? We know you better than this. You've been distant. Amelia hesitated for a moment before taking a seat opposite her parents. It's Nathan, she confessed, her voice soft but steady. I think he finally realizes what he's done, but it's too late. I won't forgive him. Her father gave a knowing nod, his lips tight. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. I've always said that. What's his next move? I think he's going to try and fix everything, his company, his reputation, his life, but he won't succeed. Not this time. Not with me. Amelia leaned forward, her eyes cold and calculating. I'm handling it my way. Her mother frowned. How? Amelia smiled, the coldness in her expression turning into something far more deliberate. I'm letting him destroy himself. I've already set the wheels in motion. He'll lose everything, his business, his reputation, and his standing in the world. And once he has nothing left, I'll give him the final blow. The humiliation he'll feel will make what I suffered seem like nothing. Her father nodded approvingly. You've been patient, Amelia. But don't let him out of your grasp. Make him pay. I will, she replied, her voice firm. I have everything I need to make him pay. Nathan had been nothing but a shadow of himself since his failed attempts to win Amelia back. His desperate calls, his emails, his pleas, it was all falling on deaf ears. Every day felt like an uphill battle, the weight of his actions sinking him deeper into a pit of despair. At the office, the pressure was building to an unbearable level. He had managed to secure a few deals here and there, but nothing that could stabilize his company. Every meeting was an exercise in damage control, and every investor he spoke to seemed more distant, more unwilling to offer the lifeline he so desperately needed. But then a call came through, one that made his blood run cold. Mr. Gray. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, smooth, and professional. This is Gavin Holt from Crestwood Investments. We've reviewed your company's financials and the state of your current ventures. Frankly, I'm concerned. Our firm is considering pulling out of the deal. Nathan's pulse quickened. Wait, no. You can't do that. You promised. I'm afraid the risks have grown too large, Mr. Gray. We'll be reconsidering our options moving forward. We suggest you find another partner to stabilize things quickly. The line went dead before Nathan could even respond. His hands shook as he dropped the phone back onto the desk. The walls were closing in. Amelia had been right. She had orchestrated this, the slow and methodical dismantling of everything he had built. In his heart, Nathan knew that he wasn't going to make it through this. Amelia had planned every move with precision, leaving him no room to escape. What he hadn't realized was that this wasn't just business to her. It was personal, and every piece of his empire that slipped away from him now was a reminder of just how far she was willing to go for revenge. His company, the thing he had worked so hard to build, was slipping through his fingers, and it was all his fault. Nathan stood at the windows of his office, staring blankly at the city below. It was late, and the lights of the skyline blurred into a wash of color. His thoughts, though, were anything but colorful. They were dark, tangled with the weight of his failure, his desperation. Every deal that had fallen through, every opportunity that slipped from his grasp, was a reminder of the one thing he couldn't escape. Amelia. She had done it. He could feel it. She had used her vast network to dismantle his empire piece by piece. It wasn't just business. This was personal, and the real horror of it hit him like a punch to the gut. All those years of trust he thought he had built with her, all that loyalty he expected, had been an illusion. She had been quietly pulling the strings all along, and now he was left standing in the ruins of his own life, struggling to hold on to anything that might save him. He thought of the conversations he'd had with her in the past few days, each more strained than the last, each one more desperate. Her calm indifference as he begged for forgiveness, the unwavering coldness that came from someone who had already moved on. She wasn't the woman he had married anymore. She was a force of nature now, and he was its victim. Nathan's phone buzzed again. Another message from his lawyer. His stomach twisted with dread. As if the financial collapse wasn't enough, now his personal life was unraveling as well. The message was brief, but the contents were chilling. The divorce papers are ready. She wants everything. He slammed his fist against the window. This was it. There was no coming back from this. The wealth, the power, the connections, everything he had taken for granted for so long, was slipping away. Later that night, Amelia stood before the full-length mirror in the grandiose master bedroom of her family estate, the soft glow of the crystal chandelier overhead casting delicate shadows on her face. Her reflection stared back at her, but it didn't seem like her anymore. The woman in the mirror wasn't the same as the one who had walked into her marriage 5 years ago, hopeful and naive. No, the person standing there now was someone who had learned, who had suffered, and who had changed because of it. She ran a hand through her hair, feeling the weight of what was to come. The final pieces of her plan were falling into place. The deals she had orchestrated through her family's connections, the subtle sabotage of Nathan's company, the social circles she had quietly manipulated. Everything had been leading to this moment. It was almost too easy, too satisfying. The revenge was hers, and in the end, it would be more than he could handle. But even as she relished the idea of his downfall, something in her stirred, a feeling she hadn't anticipated. Was it remorse? No. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. It wasn't about justice. It was about making him feel the agony she had endured. But beneath that anger, beneath the satisfaction of seeing him suffer, was a hollow space. A space that perhaps, just maybe, had once been filled with love. A love that had died slowly over time, suffocated by betrayal. It doesn't matter, she told herself. None of this matters now. The sound of the door opening behind her snapped her out of her reverie. She turned, expecting to see her sister, who had become a regular fixture at her side during this ordeal. But instead, it was her father, standing in the doorway with a grave expression on his face. "Amelia," he began, his voice low and measured, "I've been thinking. You've got him cornered, but don't let your emotions take over. Don't lose yourself in this. It's easy to get consumed by anger and revenge." She didn't answer immediately, but her lips tightened as she looked at her father. He wasn't wrong. She could feel the anger consuming her, and yet there was a part of her that knew this was the only way. She had no choice. Nathan had chosen to break her, to humiliate her, and now she was making him pay. "I'm not angry," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm in control." Her father studied her, his eyes softening slightly. "If you say so. But remember, we're not like them. We don't destroy for the sake of destruction. We build, we rebuild, and we move on." "I'm not destroying anything," Amelia said, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm just correcting the balance. I'll be fine once it's all over. You'll see." Her father nodded, but there was still a hint of concern in his eyes. "Just don't forget who you are in all this. You're stronger than this petty game. Don't let it consume you." Amelia didn't respond to him. She wasn't in the mood for comfort, for wisdom. She needed closure, and only Nathan's fall could provide that. The time for caution had passed. It was her turn now. The next day Nathan sat at his desk, staring at the mess of paperwork before him. It was all slipping through his fingers. Everything he had built. It wasn't just his business. It was his entire identity. He had spent years believing that his success would carry him through, that his charm and connections would keep him afloat. But now he realized how wrong he had been. The sudden realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Amelia had been helping him all along, and now she was destroying him. There was no escaping it. His financial ruin wasn't some random misfortune. It was a deliberate act of vengeance. She had been quietly setting the stage for his downfall, and now he had no one to blame but himself. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Nathan's head snapped up, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw who it was. Amelia. She stood in the doorway, her presence imposing yet composed. He had expected this confrontation, had imagined 1,000 scenarios in his mind, but none of them had prepared him for the cold, unflinching look in her eyes. "Amelia," he began, standing up too quickly, his voice almost pleading. I need you. Please, I'll fix everything. I swear I'll fix it all." She didn't say a word, just stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her gaze never left his, and Nathan felt himself shrinking under the weight of her silence. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but dripping with venom. "You had your chance, Nathan. You think I'll take you back after everything? After the way you humiliated me? After the way you betrayed me?" Nathan reached out to her, but she took a step back, her eyes cold. "You lost everything because of your own choices. And I won't be the one to save you," his face twisted in anguish. "Please, Amelia. You have to understand. I was wrong. You're the only one who can help me now. Please." But before he could finish, she turned and walked out, leaving him standing there, broken and defeated. Back at the family estate, Amelia lay awake in bed that night, her thoughts swirling like a storm. Nathan's words echoed in her mind, but she quickly pushed them aside. She was done with him, done with the lies, done with the games. Tomorrow, everything would fall into place. She had done what she needed to do. Now, all that was left was to watch him crumble. And when he did, she would finally have peace. The week that followed Amelia's confrontation with Nathan felt like a blur. Every day was a flurry of activity, both public and private. Her life, once defined by discretion and subtlety, had shifted into something far more public and unpredictable. The news of Nathan's financial ruin spread like wildfire. Whispers followed him at every turn, gossip about his mismanagement, his failed business ventures, and his personal scandals. His life, once meticulously constructed, was crumbling before him, and Amelia felt a strange, cold satisfaction from the chaos. It wasn't about the business deals or the money. Those were mere tools. No, this was about more than just revenge. It was about showing him that she wasn't the quiet, submissive wife he had dismissed so easily. She had been the one holding everything together, silently steering the ship, and now, with one well-placed move, she had undone him. But as the days passed, the thrill of victory began to fade, replaced by something unexpected. The hollow feeling, the void that had once been filled by Nathan, by the love she thought they had shared. It gnawed at her in quiet moments when she allowed herself to feel. She had been so focused on her plan, so consumed by her need for justice, that she hadn't considered what would happen once she had won. Is this all there is? She asked herself one night, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had the world at her feet, her name in the papers, her family's wealth and power at her disposal. But was that enough? The answer was still unclear when the phone rang, shattering the silence in the room. She picked up the receiver without thinking, expecting it to be one of her staff or maybe her lawyer. But when she heard Nathan's voice on the other end, her heart skipped a beat. "Amelia," he said, his voice raw with desperation. "Please, just hear me out. I've made mistakes. I know I have. But I need you. I need your help. I don't know where else to turn. You're the only one who can fix this." She felt the anger flare up inside her again. His arrogance, his entitlement. He thought he could just waltz back into her life after everything he had done, after he had humiliated her, betrayed her. "No," she replied, her voice cold, sharper than she intended. "I'm done with you, Nathan. You made your choice." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. "But please let me try. I was wrong about everything, about you, about us. I was blind. I need you, Amelia." His words stung. She had never wanted to be needed by him in this way. This wasn't about love. It was about control, about his inability to accept that she had moved on. But there was something else, something deeper, that kept her from hanging up. Maybe it was the sound of his voice, tinged with defeat. Or maybe it was the desperate plea in his words. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. "Why should I help you, Nathan? After everything you did? After how you treated me?" He took a long pause before responding, his voice filled with raw emotion. "Because I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I never realized what I had until I lost it." Amelia felt a lump rise in her throat. She closed her eyes, trying to push down the memories of their early days together. The moments of laughter, the quiet evenings they had spent planning their future. It felt like a lifetime ago. And now that man, that version of him, was gone. There was no going back to that. "I can't help you," she said, her voice steady. "Not anymore. You destroyed everything we had. You humiliated me in front of our friends, our family. You chose her over me." There was another long pause, and then Nathan's voice came through, weak and pleading. "I don't want her, Amelia. I never wanted her. I was a fool. You were everything I needed, everything I wanted. But I took it all for granted. I thought I could keep everything, my image, my power, my life, without you. And now look where I am. I'm nothing without you." Her grip on the phone tightened, her knuckles turning white. She could feel the tears threatening to spill, but she wouldn't let them. Not now. Not after everything. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though it was more for herself than for him. "But it's too late." With that, she hung up, her fingers trembling as she set the receiver down. For a moment, she stood there, staring at the phone as if it were a foreign object. She had expected relief, but all she felt was emptiness. The next day, the phone call lingered in her mind as she went about her day, but she refused to dwell on it. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going back. The morning was cold, the gray sky casting a somber mood over the mansion. Amelia met with her lawyer to finalize the details of the divorce. She had made sure to secure her financial independence, to ensure that Nathan could never touch her wealth again. His name, once synonymous with success, was now nothing more than a stain in her past. I want to make sure he understands the finality of this, she said to her lawyer, her eyes steely with resolve. Make it clear that there is no going back. No second chances. Her lawyer nodded. It will be done. He won't have a leg to stand on. Amelia's heart remained heavy as she signed the papers, her signature as decisive as the actions she had taken. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor. She had been forged in the fires of betrayal, and now she was untouchable. Meanwhile, Nathan sat in his office, staring at the empty chair across from him. The silence in the room was suffocating. He had tried calling Amelia, begged her to listen to him, but she had made it clear that she was done. The woman he had once taken for granted was gone. And now, with nothing left but the wreckage of his choices, he was left alone to face the consequences. He had no one to blame but himself. His secretary entered the room, breaking the silence. There's a delivery for you, sir, she said carefully. Nathan looked up, confused, but his confusion turned to dread when he saw the envelope she placed on his desk. The letterhead was unmistakable. It was from Amelia's lawyer. He opened it slowly, the words inside feeling like a death sentence. Divorce papers. Weeks passed after Nathan received the divorce papers. The weight of his choices, his arrogance, and his betrayal bore down on him with relentless force. His business was teetering on the edge of collapse, and his reputation, once pristine, was now irrevocably tarnished. The lavish life he had once enjoyed had evaporated, leaving behind only the ruin of his own making. Meanwhile, Amelia moved forward with a sense of purpose that had long eluded her. She was no longer the woman who had stayed in the shadows, silently helping her husband climb the ladder of success. She had reclaimed her life, her strength, and her independence. The world now saw her not as Nathan's wife, but as a force to be reckoned with in her own right. A woman who had built her own empire and would never again be overlooked. In the days following their final confrontation, Amelia threw herself into her work with even more vigor. She continued to grow her family's business, expanding into new markets and opportunities. She was a symbol of power, grace, and resilience. And though the betrayal still stung, it no longer held her captive. But even as she moved forward, Nathan lingered in the background, his presence a reminder of her past. He tried, repeatedly, to salvage what little remained of his life, but every attempt was futile. He reached out to her through various channels, letters, phone calls, even mutual acquaintances, but she refused to engage. She had made her decision, and there was no place for him in her new world. One evening, as Amelia stood on the balcony of her penthouse, looking out over the city, she received another unexpected call. It was Nathan. For a moment she hesitated, wondering if this time he might finally have learned something. With a resigned sigh she answered. Amelia. Nathan's voice came through, quieter than before, tinged with sorrow. I just wanted to say, I understand now. What I did, what I lost. I was foolish. I thought I could have everything, money, power, and love. But I see now that I was wrong. You were right about everything. Amelia's heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It simply felt empty, like a wound that had long since healed. Why now? She asked, her voice calm and measured. Why do you think this apology matters now, Nathan? I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve it, he replied, his voice breaking. But I need you to know that I see everything clearly now. I lost you, and I can't fix that. I needed to tell you that. I know you don't want me in your life anymore. I just wanted to say it. I was wrong. There was a long pause, the silence thick between them. Amelia's gaze shifted from the horizon to the city lights below. She had everything she had ever wanted. Power, wealth, freedom. But she had paid a price for it. She had lost love. She had lost trust. And she had gained something far more precious. Herself. She took a deep breath, the weight of the decision clear in her voice when she finally spoke. Goodbye, Nathan, she said softly, her tone final, unwavering. This is the last time we'll speak. She hung up the phone before he could respond, and for the first time in a long while, she felt peace. It wasn't the peace of victory. It wasn't the peace of revenge. It was the peace of knowing that she had moved on from the past, that she had taken control of her own destiny, and that nothing, not even Nathan, could take that from her. The following months were filled with accomplishments and triumphs for Amelia. She expanded her family's empire, pushing it to new heights, and found herself surrounded by a team of people who truly valued her for who she was, not for what she could do for them. Her parents, once skeptical of her decision to marry Nathan, now stood proudly by her side, watching as their daughter became a force of nature in the business world. Amelia also found joy in the little things again: laughter with friends, quiet moments alone, and the occasional adventure. She learned that true fulfillment came not from the external validation of others, but from within. She had found peace in her own strength. Nathan, on the other hand, continued to spiral downward. Without her, without the connections and the network she had provided him, his life was reduced to a mere shadow of what it once was. His business failed, and his name became synonymous with failure. He had lost the one person who had truly believed in him, and no amount of regret or apology could change that. One day, as he sat in his office, staring at the mess of papers and bills that cluttered his desk, he realized the truth of what had happened. He had chosen his pride over love, his ambition over the woman who had given him everything. And now there was nothing left. He was alone, just as he had made her feel all those years. But it was too late. The world had moved on, and so had Amelia. Amelia stood in front of a large glass window overlooking the city, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. It wasn't the life she had envisioned when she first married Nathan, but it was the life she had built for herself, a life that was all her own. As she looked at the skyline, a feeling of contentment washed over her. She had come through the storm stronger, wiser, and more certain than ever of who she was. And for the first time in years, she felt truly free. She didn't need revenge anymore. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already won, just by being herself. And as the sun set over the horizon, Amelia knew that her journey had only just begun.